Ethan Graves leaned silently against the side of his car, his eyes fixed on the glowing red sign of his own fast food restaurant as the sun dipped below the horizon. The parking lot buzzed with the rhythm of engines idling in the drive-thru and the shuffle of hurried footsteps entering and leaving. From a distance, everything looked perfect, flawless even. 10 locations, solid profits, loyal customers. On paper, it was the dream every entrepreneur chased. But Ethan couldn't shake the unease crawling under his skin. In the past few months, complaint emails had tripled. Customers described rude staff, long wait times, and incorrect orders. They didn't just complain, they vented frustration that bordered on betrayal. Ethan had once walked every inch of his restaurants, remembering names and stories, but success had put distance between him and the ground floor. As CEO, his world now existed inside boardrooms, behind screens, where data and graphs replaced real voices and real faces. He hadn't stepped into one of his locations in over a year. Most of the employees didn't even know what he looked like. That thought alone struck him harder than he expected. So today, he left behind his executive shell, tailored suits, spotless shoes, and the guarded demeanor of someone constantly pitched ideas. In their place, he wore faded jeans, a weathered hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. A scratchy beard cloaked his once polished jawline, grown intentionally to erase the image of the confident man from corporate memos. Today, he wasn't Ethan Graves, the CEO. He was just another customer walking through the door. The scent of sizzling chicken and deep fries filled the air as he stepped inside. But something else lingered, something invisible but heavy. The energy felt off. Not chaotic or busy, just cold, detached. The kind of apathy that settles in when people stop caring. Behind the counter stood a young woman with weary eyes and a name tag that read Maria. Her gaze barely lifted as Ethan approached. "Welcome," she murmured. Her tone, as hollow as her smile, was absent. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had said those words 1,000 times, with no one ever truly hearing them. "Hi," Ethan replied casually, trying to keep his voice light. "Can I get a number 3 combo, extra sauce?" Maria nodded and tapped the order into the register without looking up. "That'll be $8.99. He handed her a $10 bill. Before she could return his change, a thunderous voice shattered the thin layer of calm. "Maria, hurry it up. You're slower than a sloth in winter." Ethan's head snapped toward the back. A man in his 30s, towering and broad-shouldered in a manager's uniform, stood with a sneer etched deep into his face. His presence was loud even when silent, one of those people who commanded a room for all the wrong reasons. Maria's face turned crimson as she fumbled with the register. Her hands trembled, her breath shallow. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "Sorry doesn't cut it," the manager barked. "You're lucky I haven't fired you yet. God knows why I even keep you around." Ethan felt something tighten inside his chest. An ache that twisted into anger. The words weren't just harsh. They were cruel. Deliberately demeaning, designed to break down, not build up. Maria handed him his change without meeting his eyes. Her fingers brushed his palm ice cold. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet, nearly a whisper. She nodded, but it was a hollow gesture. She turned and rushed away, burying herself in the next task as if work could protect her from humiliation. As Ethan stepped aside to wait for his food, the manager swaggered over, plastic grin plastered across his face. "Hey, buddy," he said, all faux charm. "Sorry about the wait. You know how hard it is to get decent help these days." Ethan raised an eyebrow. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The manager leaned in, lowering his voice as though sharing a joke. "Between you and me, Maria's a lost cause. Always screwing up orders, dragging her feet. But corporate won't let me fire her. Gotta meet those diversity numbers, right?" He rolled his eyes, as if expecting Ethan to agree. In that moment, the world didn't just tilt, it cracked. Ethan felt physically sick. The manager wasn't just cruel, he was blind to the damage he inflicted, wielding power like a blunt object. Maria wasn't being managed. She was being dehumanized, dismissed, reduced to nothing more than a checkbox on a corporate spreadsheet. With effort, Ethan kept his voice even. "Isn't it your responsibility to train her if she's struggling?" The manager scoffed. "Train her? I don't have time to babysit." He slapped the counter and strutted off. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, rage simmering just beneath his skin. He took a seat in the corner, food untouched, eyes scanning the room. And what he saw made the knots in his stomach twist tighter. Maria was everywhere, cleaning tables, manning the register, delivering orders. The others, leaning, chatting, checking their phones. She bore the entire burden alone, her every move shadowed by judgment and exhaustion, yet still, she greeted customers with patience, apologized for delays that weren't her fault, and kept moving, like her dignity was something no one could take, no matter how hard they tried. Ethan watched her, and something inside him began to shift. This wasn't just about a failing store. It was about a culture that had rotted from the inside while he'd been looking outward. And now, he couldn't look away. Maria's hand slipped and the tray of food she had been carefully balancing clattered onto the floor, fries skittering across the tiles like startled insects. The sharp crash was followed by a thick, stunned silence that lasted only a second before Carl's voice sliced through the air like a whip. "What is wrong with you? Are you completely useless? That mess is coming out of your paycheck." His voice wasn't just loud, it was venomous. Every customer in the restaurant turned, heads swiveled, forks froze mid-air, and Maria, cheeks burning, eyes brimming, simply dropped to her knees and began to clean the mess with quiet, broken motions. She didn't speak. She didn't defend herself. She just absorbed it, like she always did. Ethan sat motionless, watching her as his fists curled into tight balls beneath the table. Rage churned in his gut, rising up into his throat like bile. He had come to observe, to understand, but what he had seen went beyond mismanagement or bad service. This was emotional warfare in a fluorescent-lit battlefield. Enough was enough. Without another bite, he shoved his tray aside and stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. His heart pounded as he walked toward the counter, where Carl now lounged against the soda machine, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. The disconnect between his nonchalance and Maria's visible anguish sent Ethan into a quiet fury. Maria was still on her knees, sweeping up fries with bare hands, moving as if she were invisible. A few customers looked on with faint sympathy, but no one intervened. No one ever did. That was part of the sickness Ethan now saw so clearly, this silent, collective complicity. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice tight, slicing through the dull murmur of the dining room. Carl looked up, surprised. "Yeah? What can I do for you? You're the manager, right?" Carl straightened, squaring his shoulders like a rooster. "That's me. Is there a problem?" Ethan nodded toward Maria. That's the problem, the way you've been speaking to her." Carl's expression hardened. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but she's my employee. I'll deal with her however I see fit." Ethan stepped closer, dropping his voice to a near whisper, low, cold, and deliberate. "It becomes my business when someone is publicly humiliated for doing their job. Do you honestly think that's leadership?" For a moment, Carl looked shaken, his bravado cracking, but he recovered quickly, flashing a smug grin. "What are you, some kind of HR superhero? Why don't you go enjoy your meal and let me handle my staff?" Ethan didn't respond. Not yet. He knew revealing himself now would do nothing but provoke defensiveness. He needed to see more, gather more. There was rot here. But how deep did it run? As he turned to leave, he caught Maria's eyes. Just for a moment. They were wide, bloodshot, filled with silent disbelief and years of worn-down resilience. She looked away before he could say anything, retreating into her task like a turtle withdrawing into its shell. The next morning, Ethan returned, but this time the disguise ran even deeper. Gone was the hoodie and cap. Now he wore the uniform of a food delivery driver, complete with a branded thermal bag slung over his shoulder. He knew it would let him move freely, unnoticed, another cog in the wheel. Inside, Carl's voice again dominated the atmosphere. "Come on, Kevin, are you a toddler? Use your legs," he barked as a teenage boy strained to carry a heavy box into the back room. Kevin looked like he couldn't be older than 16, his face flushed red from the weight and the shame. As Carl turned his back, Ethan approached the boy. "Hey kid, you okay?" Kevin flinched slightly, then nodded, trying to recover his pride. "Yeah, I'm fine, just trying to keep up." "Is he always like that?" Ethan asked, nodding toward Carl. Kevin hesitated. "Pretty much. It's worse when things get busy. But I need the hours." That phrase landed like a stone in Ethan's stomach. I need the hours. How many stayed silent under abuse just to keep a paycheck? How many swallowed their dignity because corporate policy never met the floor? He found Maria in the back restocking shelves. When she saw him, her eyes flickered with recognition, a mix of curiosity and guardedness. "You're Maria, right?" Ethan asked softly. She nodded, eyeing him warily. "Yeah." "Can I help you?" "I was here yesterday. I saw what Carl did. Has it always been like that?" Maria's eyes darted to the door, checking for danger like someone who's learned to expect it. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I just try to do my job and keep my head down." "You shouldn't have to," Ethan said, his voice low but resolute. She sighed. "It's not just me. He's like that with everyone. But nobody says anything. People need the hours. It's not like anyone at the top cares." Ethan's heart dropped. The top. That was him. She didn't know, but he was corporate, and he hadn't cared, at least not enough. Not until now. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I promise things are going to change." Maria's eyes searched his for sincerity. She didn't answer, just nodded slightly and went back to work. That night, Ethan sat in his car, scribbling page after page of notes. It was bigger than Carl. The whole store was infected with a culture of fear and exhaustion. He had built something strong once, but somewhere along the way, the humanity had bled out. It was time to fix it. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the restaurant in his tailored suit, polished shoes clicking against the tile floor. The employees looked up, confused. Carl came out of the back with his usual swagger until he saw Ethan's face. "Can I help you?" he asked, clearly annoyed. Ethan extended his hand. "Ethan Graves, CEO." Carl's face went ghost white. His eyes darted around, calculating. Then, as if trying to salvage the moment, he flashed a shaky grin. "Oh, Mr. Graves, what a surprise." "Let's talk," Ethan said, gesturing toward the office. His voice carried no anger, just quiet authority, and the unmistakable promise that something was about to change. Inside the narrow, fluorescent-lit office, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Ethan didn't waste a single second. His voice was firm, low, and edged with restrained fury. "I came here undercover this week," he began, his eyes locked on Carl's, "and I witnessed firsthand how you treat the people who work for you. It's completely unacceptable." Carl blinked, the color draining from his face. I was just trying to keep things running," he stammered. "You know how hard it is to find decent workers these days." "Stop." Ethan's voice cut through the excuses like a blade. "I've seen enough." He stepped forward, unflinching. "You don't lead, you belittle. You don't train, you tear down, and that behavior reflects poorly on every value this company stands for." Carl opened his mouth, then closed it again, his expression collapsing into resignation. He knew. There was no room for defense, not anymore. "Effective immediately," Ethan said. "You're terminated." Carl didn't argue. He simply stood, lips pressed into a bitter line, and walked out. Outside in the dining area, Ethan gathered the entire staff, Maria, Kevin, and every team member who had silently endured the culture of disrespect. They looked at him with uncertainty, whispering among themselves. "I'm Ethan Graves," he said, raising his voice slightly. "I'm the CEO of this company." The room went still. "This week, I came undercover to see what was really happening at my stores. What I saw here broke my heart, because no one should ever feel humiliated or invisible at their job." He turned to Maria, who stood quietly among the group, her eyes wide with cautious hope. "Maria," Ethan continued, "your work ethic and your resilience didn't go unnoticed. From today forward, you're being promoted to shift supervisor, with a raise to match." Maria's breath caught. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" Ethan smiled. "Completely." He turned back to the group. "And this is just the beginning. Starting now, you'll get proper training, better schedules, and a work environment where respect is non-negotiable. If any of you ever feel mistreated again, my door is open. Always." The room erupted in applause. Maria, overcome, wiped away tears of disbelief. For the first time in a long time, it felt like someone in charge actually cared. As Ethan stepped outside, the echo of applause followed him. But his heart wasn't light, it was heavy with purpose. Firing Carl wasn't the solution, it was just the first crack in a wall that needed tearing down. Back at his office, he pored through reports from every location. The story was the same across the board. Long waits, employee burnout, management indifference. How had he missed this? A knock on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Claire, his operations director, stepped inside. "You asked for me?" Ethan nodded. "I went undercover last week. What I saw was inexcusable. Mistreatment, neglect, a total breakdown of what we stand for." Claire's face paled. I didn't know it was that bad." "I believe you," Ethan said, softer now. "But this company has too many layers between leadership and the front lines. I let myself get disconnected. That ends today." "What's the plan?" she asked, leaning forward. "First, I'm meeting every manager personally in the next 2 weeks. They need to understand what's expected and what won't be tolerated. Second, we're launching an anonymous feedback system. No one should fear speaking up." Claire nodded, her confidence returning. "That's a good start. But what about stores where things are already falling apart?" "Maria's now the interim manager at the one I visited. She's earned that chance. We'll also send a support team to help her. Then we'll start identifying people like her across every location. People who care, who lead, quietly but effectively." "And those who don't?" Claire asked carefully. "They'll step up," Ethan said, his jaw tightening. "Or step out." A week later, Ethan returned to the same store, unannounced. The change was undeniable. Maria stood at the register in her new manager's uniform, calm and confident. Kevin wiped tables with pride. The staff moved like a team. There was warmth. There was hope. Ethan watched from a corner booth, unnoticed, until Maria spotted him. "Mr. Graves," she said, walking over with a cautious smile. I didn't expect to see you. I wanted to check in, Ethan said. How's it going? Maria hesitated, then said honestly, better. People are trying harder. It feels different, but there's still a lot to fix. Ethan nodded. That's all I can ask. For honesty and effort. I'm proud of you, Maria. Before she could respond, a customer called out, Excuse me, my order's missing fries. Maria turned immediately. I'll handle it, she said, already walking. Ethan smiled. Leadership wasn't about authority. It was about accountability, compassion, grit. 2 weeks later, Ethan had visited 6 of the 10 locations. He'd heard stories that mirrored what he'd seen. Managers who bullied, teams who felt invisible, burnout sweeping through the ranks. He implemented mandatory leadership training, improved schedules, and launched a reward system to spotlight employees making a difference. One night, back in his office, Ethan reviewed anonymous feedback from the new system. One message stopped him cold. Thank you for listening. For the first time in years, it feels like someone at the top actually cares. He leaned back, the words echoing through him. It was a start. But he wasn't done. He picked up his phone and dialed Maria. Hello, she answered, cautious. Maria, it's Ethan. I just wanted you to know you're doing an incredible job. And after your interim period ends, I'd like to make your position as manager permanent. There was a pause, and then Maria's voice cracked with emotion. I'd be honored. Thank you, Mr. Graves. No, Ethan replied. Thank you for reminding me what real leadership looks like. 3 months later, Ethan stood at a podium in the company's training center, facing every manager from all 10 locations. This was the first leadership summit since the operation that had changed everything. Behind him, the screen displayed 2 bold words: Reset culture. Ethan scanned the room, some faces eager, others skeptical, but all were listening. When I founded this company, he began, I believed we could build something meaningful, not just a business, but a community, a place where every person matters, whether they're here to eat or here to work. He paused, letting the silence settle. And now we're going to rebuild that vision. Together. Ethan let the silence stretch. He needed them to sit with it, to feel it. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice lower now, steadier. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of who we were. I lost sight. No one in the room moved. The tension was palpable, raw. 3 months ago, I went undercover in one of our stores, he continued. What I saw wasn't just disappointing. It was devastating. A toxic culture had taken root. Employees overworked and dismissed. Customers treated as annoyances instead of people. The warmth we built this company on had gone cold. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Ethan raised a calm hand and the room quieted once more. I'm not here to point fingers, he said. I'm here to take responsibility. And to ask the same of each of you. He turned toward the screen and clicked a remote. A new slide flashed up behind him, clean and bold. Accountability in action. He began listing off what had already changed. Anonymous employee feedback system implemented. Leadership training, 70% completion rate across stores. Recognition programs rolled out and operational. Employee satisfaction up 30% in just 2 months. These aren't just metrics, Ethan said, locking eyes with managers across the room. They're building blocks of trust, of culture, of a future we can believe in. He then motioned to the back of the room, where Maria sat beside Claire, looking worlds apart from the quiet, overworked cashier she once was. Now she wore a navy mauve blazer with confidence, not a uniform of obligation, but one of ownership. Maria, Ethan said gently. Maria rose. Her movements were tentative, her hand tightening slightly around the edge of the podium as she stepped up. She took a deep breath, the kind that came from facing fear and walking through it anyway. "Hi everyone," she began. "Not long ago, I was a cashier at one of our stores. I came in early, stayed late, and worked through breaks. But it didn't matter. I was invisible." The words struck like a stone. Several managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My manager back then made me feel like I didn't belong, like no matter what I did, I wasn't enough. Maria paused, her voice wavering. But then she straightened. Since one listened, someone believed I mattered. And now I manage that same store. And I make sure that no one on my team feels the way I once did. Her eyes swept the room, steady now. The changes we're making, they're real. My team knows it, our customers feel it, and I hope that when you go back to your stores, you'll help your teams believe it too. The room burst into applause. Maria's face lit up, both stunned and deeply moved. As she walked back to her seat, Ethan met her eyes and gave her a nod filled with quiet pride. Stepping back to the podium, Ethan continued. "Maria's story is living proof that change is possible. But it's not easy, and it's not automatic. It takes work, and most of all, it takes leadership." He let the words land. Over the next 6 months, every single store will be evaluated, from how you treat your team to how your customers are greeted. Managers who meet our new standards will be rewarded. Those who don't, he let the sentence hang unfinished. It didn't need to be said. Later that afternoon, after the summit ended and the crowd had mostly dispersed, Ethan stayed behind. A few managers had asked to speak privately, and he welcomed it. One of them was Kevin, not the teenage worker from Maria's store, but a manager Ethan had personally flagged for abrasive behavior. Kevin had narrowly avoided termination after accepting a probationary period and coaching. "Mr. Graves," Kevin said nervously as he entered the room. "Kevin," Ethan said warmly, motioning for him to sit. "What's on your mind?" Kevin shifted in his chair, eyes darting before finally landing on Ethan's. "I wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me." He looked down at his hands. "Had he visited, I realized I wasn't the manager I thought I was. I've been working on it, really working on it, but I'm scared of falling back into old habits. How do I make sure I keep growing?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice gentle. "The fact that you're asking that question, that's the most important part. The key is listening to your team, to your customers, to yourself. Real leaders aren't perfect. They're honest. They're willing to admit when they're wrong. And they know when to ask for help." Kevin nodded slowly, something shifting in his posture. "Thank you. I'll keep working on it." As he left, Ethan glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7 p.m., but his work wasn't over. He pulled out his phone and opened the company's new feedback app. Each store had a live channel now. Unfiltered, unedited, anonymous. He scrolled, absorbing suggestions, complaints, and notes of gratitude. One message stopped him. "Maria's the best manager we've ever had. She listens, she leads with heart. Thank you for promoting her. It's changed everything." Ethan's eyes lingered on the words, and a quiet smile curved across his face. For the first time in years, he felt like he was steering not just a business but a movement. Not patching broken systems, but building stronger ones from the inside out. He picked up the phone and called Maria. "Hello?" she answered, a little uncertain. "Maria, it's Ethan." "Oh, hi, Mr. Graves. Is everything okay? I just wanted to say, you're doing an incredible job. And I've been thinking, once your interim period ends, I'd like to make your position as manager permanent. What do you think?" There was a long pause, then a soft emotional response. "I'd be honored. Thank you for everything." "No," Ethan said, smiling. "Thank you for showing me what leadership really looks like. 3 months later, Ethan stood at the company's first full-scale leadership summit. Every manager was present. This wasn't optional. This was a reckoning and a rebirth. Behind him, the screen bore two powerful words: "Reset culture." Ethan looked out over the crowd, some faces eager, some wary, a few visibly nervous, all of them waiting. "When I started this company," Ethan began, "I dreamed of building something more than a brand. I dreamed of creating a place where people felt seen, heard, and valued. Not just customers, but every single person who puts on the uniform." He paused, letting the gravity settle across the room. "And now, we begin again.